What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Russ back to discuss another video. Today we'll be talking about NFL Week 4. There was a lot of interesting matchups in terms of blowouts, in terms of comebacks, and in terms of surprising play from different teams and players. But anyways, before we get into the video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. I post videos about sports, lifestyle, and pop culture. So with that being said, let's get into NFL Week 4. The first game that took place, of course, was Thursday Night Football between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. And honestly, I thought it was going to be a really entertaining matchup, but from the jump, the Lions just really showed why they potentially are going to take over the NFC North this year. Won the game 34-20, and Jordan Love, he had looked solid throughout his first couple of weeks, but in this game he definitely looked pedestrian. Had 246 passing yards, but he did throw 2 interceptions. Jared Goff, he threw an early interception, but the Lions ultimately as a whole were able to recover and bounce back. Their defense played outstanding. Of course, Aiden Hutchinson and guys on that end. David Montgomery had 3 touchdowns himself with 121 rushing yards, 32 carries as well. Besides that though, we have to talk about the Lions potentially being the 4th best team in the NFC right now. Of course, behind teams like the 49ers, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. Second matchup that we'll talk about is a game that started off early, of course, being in London between the Jacksonville Jaguars and Atlanta Falcons. And really the Jaguars, everyone expected them to win the game, and that's what they did. Desmond Ridder looked really bad. Threw basically 2 back-to-back interceptions. Was watching that game and I was like, man, it looks rough. Even his teammates weren't trying to dap him up at all. It was tough to see. And then of course on the other end, Trevor Lawrence completed 23 out of his 30 passing attempts, had 207 passing yards, a touchdown. The Jaguars really just took care of business after losing to the Texans in week 3, and they will play against the Buffalo Bills next week globally as well. So that should be a really good matchup, seeing Trevor Lawrence against Josh Allen. Speaking of Josh Allen, we got to talk about the Buffalo Bills against the Miami Dolphins. Now everyone recognized this game as potentially being game of the week in terms of matchup, in terms of how the two teams were playing, and the Dolphins as well, playing the best football throughout the first 3 weeks of the season. But the Bills put an end to all of that, because they dominated the Dolphins, winning 48-20. They're showing that the AFC East is still their division. The Dolphins are going to have to take it. And of course, they'll play later in the season again, but this was a huge statement made by the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen had 320 passing yards, had 4 touchdowns. Stephon Diggs had a really good game, had 6 receptions for $120 yards and 3 touchdowns. Looked really good. Seems like the Bills are clicking on all cylinders after losing in week 1 to the Jets. Looking really good. Josh Allen has played great throughout these past few weeks. And with the Bengals playing trash how they've been, we got to talk about the Bills potentially being the 2nd best team in the AFC right now. Of course, the Dolphins are still in the mix. That was a dominating and humbling game for them, but we can't take the Bills for granted. I just said something about the Bengals, so we might as well talk about that game. They got dominated against the Tennessee Titans, 27-3, dog. Like, it was really tough to see them lose like that. Joe Burrow playing more conservative, of course, because of that calf injury. It really would have been smart if they rested him for the first few weeks, because they maybe could have had a better chance of not only winning, but also Joe Burrow being more healthy going into later in the season. And now they find themselves at a 1-3 record going into week 5. It's tough. They're behind the Ravens in that division, and of course the Browns. They're going to have something to say about the playoff contention and things of that nature. And then the Steelers are always a tough out despite how they played. They're losing their slippage for sure. Jamar Chase was obviously frustrated, saying that he's always open.
I'm open. I'm always fucking open. Excuse my profanity. I'm sorry.
Which, I mean, he is one of the best receivers in the game, but you can't throw yourself the ball. So it's tough for the Bengals. We'll see what happens with them. It's just a slippery slope, and I would hate for something else to happen to Joe Burrow, re-aggravating that injury or something worse happening. They just haven't really managed that situation at all well this year. We'll talk about the AFC North again with the Baltimore Ravens dominating the Cleveland Browns 28-3. Cleveland, of course, didn't have Deshaun Watson in that game, and he wasn't necessarily injured. They cleared him to play medically, but he just probably wasn't ready to play in terms of reps and lack of preparation going into the game. Rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson started, and he definitely looked like a rookie. He threw 3 interceptions, which led to the Ravens being able to be on cruise control offensively and defensively. Lamar Jackson had 2 touchdowns, rushed the ball really well also. Mark Andrews had 2 touchdowns as well. So the Ravens just taking business and now have a 3-1 record. Next game we have to talk about is how the Houston Texans absolutely demolished the Pittsburgh Steelers, winning 30-6. The Texans, they definitely have something with CJ Stroud. Really love how first and foremost he puts God first always in his interviews, always advocating for that, but also just seeing it in his play, how poised he is, how great he is of a prospect going into the draft. A lot of people had their questions. He's playing great football. Still hasn't had a turnover yet. Had 306 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And for sure looks like the franchise quarterback for the Texans going forward. Dameon Pierce had 81 rushing yards. Nico Collins had 168 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. And then in terms of the Steelers, man, Kenny Pickett got hurt. Had a knee injury, but man, they got to get some stuff going. Matt Canada, a lot of people want him gone in Pittsburgh. The offense is just stagnant, and the defense were dominated. We had 2 overtime games. You can talk about those real quick. The Los Angeles Rams beat the Indianapolis Colts 29-23 on a game-winning touchdown by Puka Nacua. Looks really good right now, man. He already has 500 receiving yards for the year. No one expected him to be as good as he is as a 4th-round pick. I believe that's what he was. Had 9 receptions in this game for 163 yards, and of course his first touchdown. He's been playing great this season with Matthew Stafford, who had 319 passing yards, a touchdown, and interception, but looking really good. Still proving to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, despite being 35 years of age. And the Colts, they actually played really good as well, and they're now 2-2. Both of these teams are now 2-2. Anthony Richardson had 200 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Of course, his athleticism and running ability is really good as well. Was able to run a touchdown in. Future is definitely bright for him, and like I was talking about a second ago with CJ Stroud, those 2 quarterbacks look really good for their franchises, and I believe that Bryce Young, he'll get things right and acclimated. Just everyone adjusts to the NFL differently, and that's what people have to understand. The other overtime game was between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. The Eagles were able to win on a game-winning field goal in overtime, 34-31. And despite that, the Commanders, they played really good. Sam Howell, I would say he's for sure the quarterback of the future for the Washington Commanders. Looked poised, looked like he was in command, no pun intended, but really liked what I saw from him. And of course, with Eric Bieniemy being there now from the Kansas City Chiefs as offensive coordinator, they look really good. And there's some questions about Ron Rivera not going for 2 before overtime, of course, but you got to respect the game that the Washington Commanders had. Now, on the other end with the Eagles, they just look really great. After the first 2 games, people were seeing their offensive struggles. It was just an adjustment period for them. 2 different coordinators offensively and defensively for this year, but they're starting to get hot now. Jalen Hurts had 319 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. A.J. Brown almost had 200 receiving yards, had 175 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift had a touchdown as well, continuing to play well for them. So the Eagles, they're looking dangerous again this year. For sure going to be one of the NFC favorites. We had a comeback game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Carolina Panthers. The Vikings won 21-13. The Panthers were up 10-0 at one point in the game, but the Vikings were able to get their rhythm back and get their first win of the season, which they needed to. Of course, against the Panthers as well. Bryce Young had been struggling in past weeks, and of course he didn't play last week because of an injury he sustained, but he actually completed 25 out of his 32 passing attempts and had 204 passing yards. Like I said earlier, he's going to adjust well. Bryce Young is a very poised young man, and he has all the skills and intangibles, I guess, except for height, but he has a talent for sure to be well in the NFL. And then Kirk Cousins, he had a struggling game to say the least. Threw for 139 passing yards, had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He looked better in previous weeks. Of course, he had turnovers before then, but he had been having a lot of passing yards and things of that nature. But Justin Jefferson, of course, arguably the number 1 wide receiver in the league that we recognize, had 85 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. We'll see what goes on for the Vikings. I still feel like they have a chance to win the NFC North, but they got to catch up with the Lions and even the Packers to an extent. No one is going to consider the Bears, of course. We're about to talk about them next because how they lost. But the Vikings, they were able to get their first win on the season, and that's good for them. The Chicago Bears literally blew a 28-7 lead in a quarter. They lost against the Denver Broncos 31-28. Right now, they're projected to have the first 2 picks in the draft, which would be crazy, getting Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. But if I'm Caleb Williams, his dad already said before, if he's drafted in a bad situation, it doesn't make sense to go there. He could just go back to college where he's already making a lot of money. So that's a tough dilemma right there. But the Bears, they just look down and out for sure. Justin Fields arguably had his best game as a pro. Had 335 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. So happy for him for sure. But team-wise, as an execution-wise, it just sucks to blow that type of lead and then lose. DJ Moore also had a 131 receiving yards and a touchdown. But on the other end, the Broncos, Russell Wilson has been playing good this year. Of course, the Broncos hadn't been playing good, and that was their first win on Sunday. But he looked really good. He had 223 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. And the Broncos, as long as they can establish a culture under Sean Payton, who is a great coach we've seen in the past, they'll be okay. A few more games we have right here. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat the New Orleans Saints 26-9. The Buccaneers, after losing to the Philadelphia Eagles, were able to bounce back well. Really liking how Baker Mayfield's looking. Baker looks really good, revitalizing himself, proving to himself that he is a starting caliber quarterback. Threw for 246 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Chris Godwin had 8 receptions for 114 receiving yards. The Bucs, they're just looking really good. I'm glad because they have always had a great defense in the past few years, even with Jameis Winston before he went to the Saints and things of that nature. But yeah, they're looking really good. Alvin Kamara played in this game. He only had 51 rushing yards. Really, the Saints offense weren't able to get anything going. Derek Carr only had 127 passing yards, but right now, the Bucs look like the favorites to win the NFC South so far. Another blowout that took place was the game between the Dallas Cowboys and New England Patriots. The Cowboys gave Bill Belichick his largest loss in his career as they won 38-3 against the Patriots. Mac Jones just looked bad, no other way to put it. Threw 2 interceptions, had also a fumble that ended up leading to a touchdown on the same play. That defense in Dallas is really good. They really responded after looking bad and suspect against the Arizona Cardinals, proven to be really good. And then Dak Prescott, he had a solid game as well, throwing for 261 passing yards and a touchdown. They were able to finally get some success in the red zone, giving the ball to CeeDee Lamb for his first touchdown of the season. That defense in Dallas is for real special, of course. The only thing that comes down with them, like every time I talk about the Cowboys, it's going to be in the postseason what happens with Dak. And next week we're going to see them play against the 49ers, a team that has beat them the past 2 previous playoffs. So that game will for sure be game of the week next week on Sunday Night Football between the Niners and the Dallas Cowboys. Los Angeles Chargers beat the Las Vegas Raiders 24-17 yesterday. A really tough game, and the Chargers had a lot of camaraderie. Justin Herbert was hit late in the game, which is crazy. It was a dirty play in my opinion, made no sense, and they still ended up winning. Justin Herbert didn't have the best game, of course. I think he dealt with a little hand injury, I believe. Threw for 167 passing yards, a touchdown and interception, but they were ultimately able to grab the win. There's a lot of potential, of course, with the Chargers, but they have to tap into it. Everyone recognizes the skill, the talent that team has, but they just got to tap into that talent and play well. And in terms of the Las Vegas Raiders, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't play because of an injury he sustained last week against the Steelers. So rookie Aiden O'Connell played. He had 238 passing yards, but threw for an interception. Josh Jacobs had 58 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. And he also had 81 receiving yards. So Josh Jacobs doing it all, of course, as we know him to be one of the best backs in the league. But the Chargers prevailed, winning that game. Right now, in my opinion, the 49ers looking like the best team in the NFC. They dominated the Cardinals 35-16. But at the same time, the Cardinals, they did put up a fight. So respect to them. Literally, there was almost a fight. James Conner, ended the game, was trying to get some smoke with one of the 49ers players. So that was wild to see. So they're definitely a tough and rowdy group. But anyways, talking about the game though, Brock Purdy continues to show why he's an efficient and poised quarterback. There's no other way to put it. He only had 1 incompletion for the entire game, completed 20 out of his 21 passing attempts for 283 passing yards and a touchdown. And then Christian McCaffrey is showing why right now he is for sure the best running back in the game. We already knew that he was top 3 in Carolina. It just depended on his injuries at times. He had 20 carries for 106 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. Also had a receiving touchdown, 4 touchdowns total. McCaffrey is definitely that guy that sets the 49ers offense apart for sure. And of course they have Deebo Samuel, who didn't even go crazy. They didn't have to utilize him as much. And then Brandon Ayuk returned yesterday. He had 6 receptions for 148 receiving yards. 49ers look really good, man. We already know that defense is elite. And like I said earlier, that matchup against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football in Week 5 is going to be really good and really entertaining. Sunday Night Football consisted of a matchup between the New York Jets and the Kansas City Chiefs. It was a really good game. At first it wasn't, as the Chiefs were up 17-0, but the Jets were able to garner some momentum and only lost the game 23-20. And Zach Wilson looked great. For sure the best game that he has had so far in the NFL. Completed 28 out of his 39 passing attempts at 245 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Had no turnovers either. He looked very good in the pocket. The Jets just need to unleash him like that and play good football. They are more creative. And he also took accountability after that fumble at the end of the game. But the Jets, they're definitely going to play behind him. And if he can continue to play like that, they're going to win some games and maybe even make the playoffs. But he has to have that consistency for sure. And on the other end, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, he looked a little pedestrian in terms of just having 2 interceptions, but we know that he's the best quarterback of all time and one of the all-time great quarterbacks to ever play this game. Isaiah Pacheco is really the story of that game. He played really good for the Chiefs, had 20 carries for 115 rushing yards and a touchdown. So if there's anything to take away from that game, is that the Chiefs, they're going to be good for sure. But the Jets, there's some potential with Zach Wilson. We already knew that he was talented. For me, I always knew it was just mental with him, because it's crazy how much things get into your head. You start overthinking things like that and just playing conservative. But Zach Wilson, he has a talent. He was drafted number 2 overall for a reason. And if he continues to play like he did, a lot of the good things could happen for the Jets this year, even with Aaron Rodgers getting hurt. The last game we have to talk about is Monday Night Football, and I'm going to be very brief with this. Daniel Jones literally got sacked 11 times. He looked absolutely awful, had 2 interceptions. Not really too much to be said about this game. Geno Smith did come out of the game with a brief ankle injury. Drew Lock played, but Geno ended up coming back in, so that's a good thing for them. But they won the game 24-3. The Giants are regressing very badly, man, and it's a bad sign for sure. But we all knew that Daniel Jones was never like the greatest quarterback. I felt like they should have for sure sure franchise tagged him instead of giving him that 4-year, $140 million contract. But hey, it is what it is. They're stuck in that hole. But yeah, in New York, it's very ugly there for sure. I think for sure after these first 4 weeks, looking back at everything right now, and it is still early, but I think that the 49ers are the best team in the NFC still. The AFC for sure, I think that the Bills have reclaimed being the top seed right now after beating the Dolphins in dominant fashion that they did. The Chiefs, of course, are up there still, but they're still trying to figure some things out with a new offensive coordinator and Matt Nagy replacing Eric Bieniemy and things of that nature. And then you have to talk about the Eagles, of course, as well up there. Dolphins are still up there in the AFC too, and then NFC wise, the Cowboys, the Lions, and things of that nature, but it's just still early. We have a lot of more weeks to go, a lot of more football to go. Basically at the quarter point of the season. Let me know what y'all think in the comments down below who are the best teams right now. I appreciate you guys watching always. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss, and also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for more cooking videos, shorts, and things of that nature. More videos are on the way. Hope you are doing well and being blessed. October just started. Hope it's a blessed month. NBA starts later this month, so excited for that. So stay tuned for more content and videos about the league as well. But y'all be blessed and have a good one, and appreciate y'all always.